And as I'm on my evening walk tonight, I thought, what can I share? What might make a difference in people's lives? Well, one of the toughest lessons that I've learned is that when I first went into nursing, and even as a friend, I wanted to help everybody. And I couldn't understand how it was so easy to solve everybody else's problems and not be so good at my own. Well, you've probably found that. If you've got friends or family that you give repeated advice to and they never seem to get it, they're stuck in that relationship that doesn't work, or they're stuck in that job that doesn't work, and you can see blatantly that they'd be better off out of it, but they never take your advice. Or it could be anything in their life, but you see a solution and they're not taking it. Well, welcome to the most frustrating thing of any therapy. Now, there's a thing that I didn't understand until the late 90s when I read a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by Caroline Myss, or M-Y-S-S. I think it could be Mace or Mice. But she's a very intuitive lady, and she introduced to me the concept of secondary gain. Now, secondary gain is something that we get when we have an illness. We have an illness or a problem or an issue that never seems to solve itself. We always get something out of it. So an example of secondary gain would be somebody, I'll give you a good example from my history, working as a nurse. We used to get people who were elderly would be admitted with pneumonia around about December time. And frequently they'd be living on their own for several years, and their relatives would not be visiting them anymore, sometimes for decades. And when they got admitted, we always had to inform the next of kin. And what used to happen then is relatives that they hadn't seen for years suddenly turned up, being very caring, couldn't do enough for their dear old relatives. They'd see all of their young relatives, they'd be brought fruit, they'd be in a warm hospital ward, they'd be surrounded by people, have company every day. And then suddenly a day comes when the doctor comes up and says, right, the good news is, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, you're well enough to go home. And of course, they were going back to cold and lonely house. So, surprise, surprise, quite frequently, these patients would be readmitted within days or weeks of going home because they had a secondary gain. They were actually better off ill than they were being well. So everybody has an aspect of secondary gain to any illness, and it might take some searching, it might take some digging, but the bottom line is that you cannot help everybody. You just can't. So if somebody has got the same problem that they keep presenting with you time and time again, sometimes it's best just to give them a good kick up the arse and say, well, you obviously like it, or you'd have done something about it by now. I realise that might sound a bit harsh, but if you've had that frustration of hearing the same problem time and time and time again, then maybe it's time to get on the large boots and start kicking, because that's what friends are for. Be healthier, be happier, and have some fun along the way.